If I set up my employee with a situation that they're happy with, the person they're visiting is going to be happy. So we take into account our staff's what they tell us is their comfort level, but also what we're believing is. So sometimes someone will say I can handle lots of things, and then we sort of dig a little deeper and it's clear that they need someone that might have some word retrieval challenges, but not someone that can perseverate over forgetting about something and get real down on themselves. So we focus on the employee's needs, and that makes the client happy.
Hello, and welcome to Not Born Yesterday, a podcast dedicated to older adults and the challenges and joys of aging. I'm Miriam Goodman.
Not Born Yesterday is brought to you by Next Village SF, a local nonprofit providing older adults in the Northeast neighborhood of San Francisco with support to help age in place. I'm Lynn Winter-Gross.
If you've been paying attention to the latest news about aging, you've probably seen many articles and reports stressing that social relationships are very important as we age. A long Harvard study revealed that having strong relationships with others not only leads to happiness, it also adds years to our lives. So today on Not Born Yesterday, we're going to talk about social interactions and how preventing the feelings of isolation too common among older people can improve the quality of life.
Our guest today is Ben Lewis, the founder of Engage as You Age, a social interaction service provider. Of course, there are other organizations that provide visitors to isolated seniors, but we want to share the story of this one, as it does have some unique features. Engage as You Age pairs seniors with smart, empathetic people who share their interests and passions. The result, authentic relationships that improve seniors' quality of life, cultivates a sense of belonging, stimulates the mind, and improves health and motor functions. Ben, welcome to Not Born Yesterday.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with your clients. Who's the typical senior who your employees visit?
Wow, that's a tough question. I'd say typically there's a reason why we're there. Someone either lacks the fire in their belly to get out and see the world, they're physically having a hard time getting out, or they feel socially out of place, even in an assisted living, or they're alone at home with a caregiver that they can't relate to, or they're home alone, period, without assistance. There's a reason why we're there, if that makes sense.
So your volunteers aren't caregivers as well?
They are not volunteers, they're paid employees, and they're definitely not caregivers. My theory, it's not an eloquent way to put it, but the same person who helps you in the toilet is probably not the best person to sit across and break bread with. I feel like there's a clear distinction. I'm slipping in someone that has the look and feel of a friend that ultimately becomes one.
So do most of your clients come from family referrals? I would assume that family members who live far away from their older relatives would feel relieved to know that someone's coming to visit their loved one and keeping them engaged. And family members even who live in the same city might live nearby, but also appreciate some time off.
Or two family members that live in the same home under the same roof. And, over the course of the past week, for example, in San Francisco and San Jose, I met multiple families where husband and wife live together. In one instance, the husband is starting to lose some executive function, has some word retrieval challenges, and his wife feels guilty leaving him home alone for extended periods. So we're going to match him up and do some art and metal work and some outings. Met a nice woman down in San Jose who lives with her husband who's still working. He needs a respite to get some work done, and he wants her to get out of the house with someone fun. So it sometimes is a relative that lives all the way across the country, that's worried about their parent or parents or an aunt or an uncle. Other times it's a husband and wife, one of whom needs a respite. It really depends. It's rare that someone directly reaches out to us for socialization. It's more often than not a family member, a relative, a social worker, or like UCSF or somewhere like that's referred someone to us.
So you go to people's homes and go to facilities where seniors are living. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'd say certainly we work with people in their homes, also in facilities, and there's a broad range of facilities, right? You have assisted living, memory care, board and care, which are typically those homes that house about 6 residents and have ramps you can often see in the front of them. So we work with people in facilities and their homes.
So can you give us an example or some examples of what it would be like when someone comes into your home and socializes with you?
Sure, it depends on the circumstances. Oftentimes when someone lives home alone, if they're mobile and they're not a fall risk and we're comfortable offering an arm to assist them, we'll get them out and about. So on any given day, I was just reviewing some notes of a client over in St. Francis Wood in San Francisco. We took her out to Tartine, where she loves bread and butter and a cappuccino, and then got her out to take a look at the magnolias, which are in bloom right now in Golden Gate Park, and brought her home safely about 2.5 hours later. Other people that might be bedbound, and we have plenty of clients that have a hard time getting out of their home, it's bringing the outside world to them. Sometimes it's as simple as someone would really love to have a slice of pie and a good conversation. We'll bring a slice of pie and a good talk. Sometimes it's tapping into their long-term memory and leveraging like Google Street View and bringing them literally to the home that they grew up in, whether it's in Ohio or Maine or wherever. And images sort of, jog their memory and get them thinking about the past and drawing them out. So we try and bring the outside world to people that can't get out, and we try and get people out that can get out, whether they're in their own home or in a facility.
You mentioned that some of the clients do have mental limitations, so there must be some specific challenges to that for your employees. How does that work?
What we're trying to do is make our employees happy, the people that we're matching up with the isolated seniors. So when we onboard them and get to know them, we figure out their comfort level with everything from various stages of dementia to hallucinations, which can happen with Lewy body dementia and Parkinson's, to depression, to physical challenges. If I set up my employee with a situation that they're happy with, the person they're visiting is going to be happy. So we take into account our staff's what they tell us is their comfort level, but also what we're believing is. So sometimes someone will say I can handle lots of things, and then we sort of dig a little deeper and it's clear that they need someone that might have some word retrieval challenges, but not someone that can perseverate over forgetting about something and get real down on themselves. So we focus on the employee's needs, and that makes the client happy.
So who is the typical employee or some typical kinds of employees?
So we look for people that have some life experience, oftentimes like anyone from a graduate student to someone that's retired. We have folks sort of in their early 20s to their mid to late 80s working for us. And the common thread is they're reliable, have a tremendous amount of common sense. I can't possibly prepare someone for every imaginable situation. I can certainly prepare someone for 90% of those situations, but there's those 10% of situations where I need someone to say, this isn't right. I need to call 911 or to reach out to our staff for help. I need to trust their judgment. So I need someone with sound judgment. The ability to say, I don't know is really important, and knowing when to ask for help. And someone that if they're visiting someone who gets sick and needs to take a few weeks off, it's not going to impact their finances. So the money helps and it makes them more reliable, but it's not an essential aspect to their, monthly budget, for example.
What kind of training do they have?
So we train everyone individually to work with every single client they work with. So we spend a couple hours preparing someone for every new client that they work with. And that's after we go over a nearly 100-page handbook, going over different procedures and policies. And every individual situation is different. So before someone walks into a home, we're going to tell them whether or not the carpet is yellow, whether there's Wi-Fi or not, whether there are grab bars to get up and down the stairs. And then I'm personally going to walk into the home with the person for the first session, facilitate, make sure that everyone's comfortable. And then we do a follow-up training after the first session to really make sure we can hit the ground running and answer any questions they have. For as much as you want to prepare someone to work with someone before they meet them, it's after they meet them and have thoughtful follow-up questions on how to handle various situations in that home that we can really prepare them and set them up for success.
What have you found that the employee gets out of the relationship?
A broad range of things. It's a real meaningful connection. Sometimes it can be inspiring. You meet some people that are 93 that no matter how much pain they've had in their life, see the glass is half full. And it can be real inspiring for someone to visit them and take them out, even if their stories can get repetitive over time. It's a feeling of helping someone and feeling connected. Um, like I said, some people like a little bit extra cash to pay for a vacation or sports tickets or things they like along those lines. But I think particularly when it's not 30 or 40 hours a week, we're talking typically 2 or at most 8 or 10, and most people work 2 or 4 hours a week for us. It it doesn't feel like a job. You need to be professional and show up, but it's not that hard to be on point and present for someone for a handful of hours a week. If you're talking about doing that 6 or 8 hours a day, it can be exhausting. Like I love most human beings. I'm very social by nature. But over the course of a week, I might take a couple clients out. I'll meet with families and meet with employees, and I'm on all the time. I'm really, really happy to curl up with a book and be left alone after I've tucked my son in some nights. It's almost too much socialization. So if we do a small amount for the people that work for us, we get a lot more out of them. They're far more invested in it. And if we thoughtfully match them up, they get a tremendous amount out of it.
What percentage of your employees are older adults?
How would you define older adult?
Over 60?
Okay, so I'm not an older adult yet. Okay, but I'd say over 60, probably 20, 25%, something like that. I find there are a lot of clients that really like having someone that they probably should have crossed paths at some point, based on interests, but they didn't. There's a client I recently matched up in Sausalito that what's been great about it is it's someone that literally dresses at the same stores, has the same interests. And when they've gone out and run into some of our clients' friends, it can be introduced as this is my friend, as opposed to what looks to be a caregiver. Versus in that scenario, had we brought someone in 20 or 30 years younger, it might have seemed a little strange if she ran into friends around sort of Marin County. So it depends on the situation. Sometimes the same age is great. Other times a difference in age makes a big difference.
I assume that the relationship between the employee and the person that you've just talked about becomes valuable to both people. But what happens when the client starts to deteriorate physically or mentally? Does your employee have problems with that?
It depends on the pairing and the situation. What I'll say is we get notes after each visit. And certainly if there's anything pressing, my staff reaches out to me immediately and, calls attention to concerns. I'm sort of the behind the scenes person once the relationship gets going, and I'm passing along the notes to the family and also encouraging them to be in touch with me so that I know what my person's going to walk into. So if someone takes a visit to the emergency room over the weekend, we'd love to know that so that on Tuesday or whenever we come, we're sort of aware of what's taken place. Families don't always communicate as well as I would like. So sometimes that's a challenge for my employees. As people's situation, usually people are getting worse over time, not reflective of the service that we're providing, but people's cognition, deteriorates over time. Their physical challenges tend to become more significant. We sometimes will switch someone out, or we'll have the hard conversation of telling a family that we don't feel like we're, making a difference at this point. And sometimes families will ask us to continue on because it's almost symbolic. They feel like by cutting the service, they're almost giving up on, their parent or partner and being like alive and vibrant. And those can be some really difficult conversations. On the flip side, one of the bigger challenges I have as an employer is as my people become very invested in who they're working with, sometimes families will abruptly stop services, not because of anything we've done, but they've decided their mother can no longer live in their home with them and they're moving them to a facility, and they give us minimal notice and the facility is an hour and a half away. And my staff member can't even really say goodbye. That stinks because I don't have any control over that, right? I can certainly, if someone's local, say, look, my person wants to visit them again. There's certainly no charge. Can they get some closure off their experience? And 98% of clients would say yes to that. But we do have instances where it's kind of a sudden stoppage and it's hard on my employee. So I think that answers your question.
I think so. Do you ever get the feeling that any of these visited people kind of resent the fact that somebody has to be paid to visit them?
the majority of people that receive our service aren't privy to sort of the nuts and bolts of it. So most people receiving the service who tell a bit of a white lie. That sort of goes back to what I was saying before about people more often than not don't directly reach out for services. I've certainly had plenty of people asking for computer lessons that really wanted socialization, and the computer lesson was the excuse to bring someone in. And I think if you got a couple of glasses of wine in them, they'd probably own up to it and admit it. You know, they live home alone and they're lonely. Um, Most people don't know that it's a paid service when they're receiving it, or they almost just don't want to think about it that way. And what I'll say is, I think there are a lot of different models out there that can provide socialization. And, there's the nonprofit side of things, there's the for profit, and I think there's a place for all of those things. I think from a cost basis, we're quite affordable and reasonable when you look at the actual hourly programmatic costs that we're providing. When you look at like the $9.90 of a lot of nonprofits that provide social services for seniors, it's if you actually break down the hourly costs when you factor in all the executive salaries and stuff, our model's more cost effective. It's just a different sort of revenue stream. So I say that with a wife who's a professional fundraiser, so I have a pretty good sense of how this stuff works.
Are your staff different from those that are volunteering for these nonprofit agencies? Is it a different, are the people that are getting visited getting a different kind of service?
I think I can't speak to each individual sort of volunteer program. What I can say is I think we do an excellent job, and there's a reason why we've been around for as long as we have and have continually grown and touched more and more people's lives. I think the difference between what I'm providing and I think a volunteer program is I'm offering a lot of consistency, communication, clear boundaries, and professionalism. Not to say that there aren't volunteer programs that do a nice job. I just think I've got a pool of really wonderful people that do an excellent job, that take it seriously and don't abruptly quit on people and vanish. I make it very clear that when you come into someone's life, you can do a lot more harm than good by visiting them for 3 months and saying, I'm out of here, I'm going to go do something else. If someone suffers from depression or just has a hard time opening up, it can take some time for them to open up. And if you leave, you do more harm than good. So I think, not to try and like defend my model, I'm hesitant to differentiate it, maybe just because I think I haven't directly seen the volunteer pools and interview those people, but I often will have nonprofits tell me that, they're offended that, we charge for our services, and, they fundraise to provide the services. It's just a different funding model is how I see it.
So if a listener today decides that they would like to be one of your employees, how do they know if they have what you're looking for?
I think they need to look themselves in the mirror and be really honest about who they are. First and foremost, I think everyone likes to see themselves in a certain light as reliable and caring. I make it difficult to work for us in that I'll say, okay, great, thanks for the phone interview. Take a week and get back to me and tell me A, B, C, D, and E. And a lot of people will often kind of vanish after that first stage. We're a society where people push buttons and expect robots to deliver food, and people expect to quickly get a job and be up and running. I really need someone that's reliable and kind, and that's why the majority of my employees come from other employees. They have a positive experience and they understand what's involved in this and can express it to a friend.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all this information with us, and I hope people listening today will either decide they would like to do the same thing or maybe contact you, and we really appreciate your time. So thank you to our guest, Ben Lewis of Engage as You Age.
Thank you.
Today on News You Can Use, we're talking about money again, but this time it's about financial help your adult children might need due to the loss of a job or other sudden setbacks. If this happened in your family or is still ongoing, here's some advice from the experts. Many adults lost their income and financial independence during the pandemic. Many more faced layoffs from the recent downsizing of numerous high-tech companies. If your adult children were lucky enough to have understanding parents or parents that welcomed them back, both found themselves in a new situation. Now, instead of your son's teenage room with his football pennants and posters of rock stars, he and his family may be living in a room stuffed with a crib, sleeping bags, and piles of laundry. Most of us would find the arrangement challenging for both the parent and the adult child, who may feel humiliated and embarrassed to find himself in this situation.
According to the findings of Credit Karma, thousands of parents are currently supporting or helping their adult children financially. Many admitted that doing so causes them personal financial stress. While some are housing their adult children in their homes, others are paying some or all of their children's bills, like student loans and car payments. Some are also helping with the grandchildren's school expenses. Not surprisingly, this new financial burden causes major mental and financial stress on the parents. For many, providing financial support to their adult children is making it harder for them to afford their own necessities or plans for retirement.
So if you're a parent who's suddenly supporting family members, it's time to assess your own finances and determine how much you can really afford. Don't put yourself in a situation where you cannot realistically cover your own expenses. Now, here are some suggestions from professional financial advisors. For example, have an honest and open conversation with your adult child about your financial situation and their need for support. It may be difficult, but it is important.
Create a budget that works for both of you.
Be firm and consistent with your boundaries.
And be careful about borrowing from your own savings. If you're still working, you still need to keep money aside for your retirement and personal emergencies.
Set a cutoff date for your support. If your child is unemployed and doesn't seem motivated to look for another job, help them look for a job or suggest ways for them to manage their debts.
Brace yourself for emotional fallout. It's complicated, and your adult child may resent needing your help, and you might miss your sense of privacy.
No one wants to see their family members struggle financially. Still, if you plan to give or lend your child a considerable amount of your money, it's best to plan wisely and ensure that your assistance is sustainable and realistic.
And that's our podcast for today. Our thanks to our guest, Ben Lewis of Engage as You Age. You can learn more about Next Village SF at their website, nextvillagesf.org. Our theme music is from Hook Sounds, and Jason Dahlstedt is our engineer. And thanks for listening. We'd love to hear what you would like us to discover and discuss. Please contact us at notbornyesterdaypodcast.org. Be well, stay strong, and remember, you weren't born yesterday. I'm Lynn Winter Gross.
And I'm Miriam Goodman.